What's up, guys? I'm just sitting here thinking of time. I've been thinking of it and wondering what other people's opinion of it is, because I have a firm grasp on my belief in the Bible. So I'm wondering if I push myself mathematically and with physics, and I'm wondering the more I understand time, how it lines up with the Bible. So my question would be, if space and time are actually the same thing, which is what Einstein says, we could cause time dilations. And I'm just wondering, because time is said to be different for God than it is man, it means it's essentially, for him, he's outside of it, so it's malleable for him. So will we ever, as we achieve more and more sanctification, more and more godliness, will we achieve any sort of a knowledge base to make time malleable for us so we operate outside of time? Because that's not the only thing that makes God God. You understand? So I was just thinking, the more we understand time, we're seeing that they're now it's not a one-dimensional thing. They're actually discovering there are 3 time dimensions at a minimum. So whatever that means. But I'm thinking with quantum mechanics, that makes sense, because if we look, we have things can have a positive, negative, or both at the same time sort of thing. So it's beyond binary. We know, and I think that's kind of getting us beyond good and evil, because we need to understand there's good, there's evil, and then as God understands it, he transcends that, because he knows that what a human calls evil, he can use for good, which means ultimately it's neither good or evil. So when we ate the fruit and fell, when Adam ate the fruit and fell, in other words, the reason that was a sin is he wanted to eat something and do something in his own power to achieve the knowledge of good and evil, which was something that only God had at the time. So it was sin because Adam willfully did it. But what if Adam hadn't been told by God and he ignorantly ate that fruit, and then he obtained the knowledge of good and evil when he wasn't even trying to do anything God didn't say? It wouldn't have been sin because God hadn't made it a rule yet. So the only way that we sin is disobeying a rule that we actually know. I think God's law is different in that way than civil law or criminal law, in that our law that we make as a man, we say there is no ignorance to the law. That's not an excuse. But I think the difference between willful and unwillful sin is ignorance. And I think God particularly calls out willful sin because the ignorance isn't there. So it's a willful disobedience. And so we're willfully turning our back on God. And I think if we do that enough, we could fall into a state of apostasy where we willfully turn our back on God and everything, and we're just headed straight to hell. Willfully. Whereas if we're ignorantly headed to hell, God can save us, and he does often, and that's sending Jesus back, The thing is, Jesus did not have to die because he did not sin, and the punishment for sin is death, but he chose to. So I'm thinking, in that way, since he died, he came back, he showed himself to the disciples, and then he promised to send us a comforter. So he's giving us the Holy Ghost, and he's showing himself to us through the Holy Ghost. But we realize that God is a Trinity, so Jesus is the Holy Ghost and the Father is the Holy Ghost. So if they're all one and the same, it's just one aspect of them that we're seeing the Holy Ghost. Then for me to say that I haven't seen Jesus and that I have the Holy Ghost would seem to be contradictory. So in that way, if I've seen Jesus through my acceptance of the Holy Ghost and knowing 100% that I have it in my own heart, then that would mean that I am now commissioned to preach the gospel to other people, and that by definition I'm an apostle just as much as Paul is, right? Am I missing something in that sort of apostolic doctrine? So to me, in accepting Christ, I have now accepted the first death, and that would be ego death, death to self, and I'm accepting Christ, which means I'm being sanctified outside of time, so I am sanctified. So in doing so, I'm now an eternal being, and I have been the whole time, and I just was ignorant to it, and I opened my eyes, so now I'm enlightened, right? So through that enlightenment, which was only God, and I was only saved by his grace, and the fact that he died on the cross, just because I didn't know I was saved, I was all along. So I don't know if this is all making sense, but does that then biblically prohibit time travel? And I'm thinking no, because I look at space-time, say three-dimensionally, you look at like a three-dimensional donut that we're all traveling in, but we're bound to the space, but not necessarily time. Maybe it's an eternal thing that never actually ends. And I look at it like God is a white hole, in that he's only spitting out, and he's never accepting. So he can't accept anything from us because he's just a giver. And what if the only way to get to him was to go through a black hole to end up in heaven? And then when we came down here from heaven, we were spit out of a white hole, even if it happened one photon at a time. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it makes sense to me, you know? I've never taken psychedelics, maybe. Maybe I should. I can't imagine where my brain would be. But this is stuff that keeps me up at night, guys. And I'm just wondering if there are 3 time dimensions, what they really are, and how we can interpret that. Because if we we started off with duality, like that would be like computer coding in the binary, like left, right, on, off, 1, 0, right? But now if we have quantum computers, we have left, right, and both at the same time, which unlocks unlimited, well, not unlimited, but a lot more potential. So I think once we understand that, then we'll realize how to transcend above quantum computing in the future. But we can use those to solve huge questions. But the thing is, we look at them as not accurate because they're fallible and they spit out things that seem to be not true to us sometimes. But maybe they are true and we just don't understand it yet because we're stuck with this binary sort of thinking, this good, evil, that we need to transcend. And that would be forgetting this sort of knowledge that we obtained from that fruit and getting back to a mental state where God had us as children, where we believe in like unlimited possibility and not limiting ourselves to this crazy box that we put ourselves and God in. Anyway, that's today's meditation on my lunch break. Love you guys.